Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to present this afternoon on the conference that we attended in March, the Ellyn Satter Division of Responsibility. We're going to start with having you fill out the little checklist that we had you pick up on the way in. We're not going to look at it or really talk about it. It's just something for you to think about where you are in your relationship with mealtime and food. And don't score it thinking about if you're feeding your family. Think about it just in regards to how you feel about those questions for yourself personally. Hey Susie, grab, over there. One of each.
Go grab these forms over there.
Kelly's on her way in too.
Oh, is she? Okay.
Oh, I'm not sitting there.
It's looking at them, not you.
Be on camera. So fill that out. We're not really gonna question you on it, but just think about your relationships with mealtime.
Can I get one?
Yeah, certainly.
She's in it.
Okay. Here, I will look at this.
You just celebrating his birthday. Happy anniversary. Thank you. I'm still not on Facebook. My husband posted that. People have been saying, oh, thanks. Like, how did you know that? Nice. Yeah, that's because you posted on Facebook something lovely. Yeah. My husband's not on Facebook. He doesn't have it. He doesn't much. I read it. I don't know.
Everyone pretty much done with that?
Yep.
Okay, so that's really just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about, and it'll make more sense as we go along. I'm going to talk about kind of the theory of the why Ellyn came up with this approach and some logic that's embedded within the approach. So the first question is why? Why did Ellyn Satter come up with this? And so what we know is that historically, what we've been doing isn't working super well. So we have a lot of families that don't love mealtime. They find it stressful. they find it kind of a horrible experience. They don't really know how to start. So Megan and I were with the Parents as Teachers group a couple of weeks ago, and it never really ceases to amaze me how so much stress is built into meal times, and just like their body posture and the way they were talking about it was generally a miserable experience. I mean, we had everything from families who were just kind of there because they wanted more information on how to do this and how to feed their kids and what to feed their kids. But there was one couple that was there together, and that mom was talking about all the pressure she was feeling from their pediatrician because he felt really strongly that their toddler needed to drink a very specific amount of milk. And this particular kiddo apparently doesn't, I mean, he drinks it and it's fine, but he doesn't get to that number, and that was causing that mom a lot of stress. And she was still offering bottles, wasn't she? So she was still offering bottles to make up for this number, and then that number was kind of getting in the way of the meal times, and we basically gave her permission to allow her toddler to drink as much milk as he was going to drink because he was healthy and he was growing and everything else was fine. He just wasn't reaching this magic number of 20 ounces that the pediatrician felt like was a reasonable amount of milk. And then there was another family that it was the mom and the grandma were present, and the mom was expressing so much frustration that she had about how she and her husband were not anywhere on the same page about how they were going to do this. It was just causing a lot of stress for them, and it felt like it consumed most of her mental capacity to figure out how she was going to feed her kid. And so then you had the dynamic of the mom and the grandma that it almost felt like they were trying to bring us into the marriage dynamic and to tell the mom to tell the dad that he was wrong. Yeah. And that what he was doing was inappropriate. And so it seemed interesting that we hear it all the time and nobody seems to have a solution to this problem. So how did we get here is the next question. And she had a couple of interesting theories, and one of them was about the introduction of infant formula to the market. So this is not that infant formula is bad. Infant formula is great. It's literally saved lives for kids who can't nurse. It gives feeding flexibility to the family. It gives moms freedom to be able to go back to work, especially in a dual income kind of society that we live in. But the tricky thing that it brought along is that we suddenly went from really only looking at a baby's cues of, you're hungry, so I'm going to feed you, and I'm going to feed you until you're done, and I really have no idea how much I'm feeding you unless I weigh you before I feed you, and I weigh you after I feed you to get a number, and clearly nobody's going to do that. So then we have formula, which was wonderful, and it was a great addition to the market, but then suddenly we're measuring everything. So now, instead of just watching an infant's cues of hungry and full, and then maybe they eat every hour and a half or something like that, and then they wait a little bit longer, and then they eat a little bit more clustered. Suddenly it's 6 ounces every 3 hours, and you're going to do that 5 times a day. And so then you have this bottle that is full of formula, which is very expensive, and you're still looking at the cues, and you can still see when they're hungry, and you can still see when they're full, but you might still have an ounce left because at that particular moment that baby wasn't super hungry, and so he only drank 5 ounces instead of drinking 6 ounces. But then you have this ounce that's left in the bottle, and you feel like, well, somebody told me I have to feed my kid 6 ounces, so I'm going to finish the bottle. And you wait, and you try, and you coax, and you encourage just to finish the bottle. And so then that's a point where the feeding relationship can kind of get messed up because all of a sudden we're not completely respecting cues, we're finishing a number. And so then just the pressure that comes along with all of that. So we live in a very pressure food society. So we've got, your kids need to eat certain things, your kids need to eat certain amounts. We all want to know about serving sizes. We live in a diet-centric society where we all need to be eating certain things at certain times of the day. And so then you feel that pressure. And a funny thing that she had said at one point was that everybody was doing perfectly fine until outside organizations started to get involved. So what she meant by that was government food guides. So food guides started, I looked it up this morning, food guides started in 1943, and that was the first one that came out. And so that was geared towards people during World War II, and there were food rationings. So the point of that food guide was to help families make their rationed food last longer. So that hung around for a little while. But then we didn't have that anymore. But then we had more recommendations that we needed to make. So then it's just kind of snowballed. And then when most of us were growing up, it was the 4 food groups. And that lasted until the 90s. And then we had 2 food guide pyramids, and with the pyramids was when they started talking about serving sizes again. So then you have this added pressure of, oh, I have to eat 2 cups of fruits and vegetables in a day because that's what the pyramid says. So all of these layers of pressure are building up, and instead of enjoying a meal time, we feel like we have to fill out a pyramid in a box to make sure that we're getting everything we need, and then feeding time becomes kind of miserable. And then, just on top of that, with the keto diets and the low carb diets and the low fat diets and the blood type diets and the grain break, like all of these, everything's kale, and it's wonderful. So we have all of this pressure that we feel like we have to fulfill to get to a certain point. And I was working on this section the other day in a coffee shop in Lawrence, and there was a mom and a mom and a daughter, an adult daughter, and a grandchild. And I had no idea what they were talking about, but I heard the grandma say to the adult mom, well, the ketogenic diet is good for that. And then the daughter looked at the mom and was like, Mom, seriously. And like her posture just totally changed because there's this pressure about what other people think that we need to be doing. So that's kind of how this all got started. And then there's some logic within it, is that basically eating and growing is normal. And when eating is growing is normal, some kids grow at the high end, some kids grow at the low end, some kids eat a lot, some kids don't eat a lot. And when everything is just kind of going on as it should, kids grow relatively consistently and they they grow relatively consistently and they eat relatively consistently, with the understanding that a toddler might eat more one day, might eat a little bit less the next day, and that's all normal. But as long as they're healthy and trending, then that's how it's supposed to be done. The second bit is that kids need ongoing adult support. So adults have jobs at meal times, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But one of those jobs is that we need to be teaching our kids how to eat. So we can't expect a child to suddenly be super great at behaving and acting and participating in mealtime if they never see us do it. So that's her kind of foundation, is that the very first thing you have to start with is making sure that you're eating as a family and being the actual leader at mealtime. And then the third part is that not growing and not eating is not normal. So when that's happening and you have a kid who's either falling off the growth chart, or they're not eating and they're not healthy and something is going on, we have to figure out what is interfering with their capacity to eat and their capacity to grow. So that could be a family dynamic situation, that could be a medical situation, it could be a relationship between the feeder and the eater, it could be medical trauma, it could be emotional trauma. We had a great example in North Team the other day of a kiddo who, I don't remember how old he is now, but he's an older toddlerish, and he's hoarding food because he, as an infant, was restricted so much that even as a little baby, he learned that I have to hoard my food in order to make sure that I have food. So now they've got these problems that are going with him into toddlerhood, that he doesn't feel safe in his feeding dynamic with his family, so he has to take control of it. Another point she made was that a lot of families are really concerned that when you do allow this division of responsibility to really play out and you let the kids literally eat whatever they want of what's offered at the table, and if they only choose to eat one thing every night for a long time, that they're not going to be healthy and they're not going to grow and they're not going to thrive. So they did some research within their own group of doing lab values on the kids that, on the families that did practice this, and they really did find that they're healthy and that their iron levels are good and their nutrient levels are good and their vitamin and mineral levels are good. So when you do it, it really works, and you can reach her quote was that you can achieve nutrition and wellness goals by focusing on eating competence. And I feel like generally speaking, we do this to some level, but maybe not as structured as we hope that we can do it moving forward now that we've learned more about it. That's a good problem.
Okay, so we're going to go into some definitions, and then later on Madison's going to go into the Satter model a little bit more detailed, so I might skim over some of the things so then Madison can follow up with it. But so like what Dana was saying about that eating competence, that first thing is being a competent eater. And so I think everyone has just the short notes, but being a competent eater is as simple as feeling good about what you're eating, enjoying your meal, behaving nicely, so not fussy. And so that's why it's really important that we're there teaching the kids how to behave nicely, because one of the great things about Ellyn Satter's model, and I remember even Lori one time in the meeting when we were talking about it and presenting just briefly, is you need to behave. And so our job is to teach you how to behave, and if you don't have manners, then we've got to figure out something. Picking and choose from foods that you make available, and that also includes those manners. So like, yes, please, I'd like to have another piece of that sweet potato. No, thanks, I don't want that asparagus today. And then, then eventually that sneaking up is going to happen. Like, mom's eating that asparagus. I'm going to give it a try. And then letting that child to determine how much that child wants to eat. So that's developing that eating competence for that child. So I think everyone it was through the email. In the email, the PDFs that got sent out, one of them is the joy of eating, and it just talks about becoming or being a competent eater. And this one was more geared toward, I felt like it was more for ourselves eventually. So being a competent eater from this, so it is in your email. If you didn't print it off, don't even worry about it. But one of them is to feed yourself faithfully. So reassuring yourself that you will be fed, there's structure there, taking the time to eat, developing a meal and snack routine that works for you, enjoying foods and not following these rules that are in place, giving yourself permission to eat. Saying it's all right to eat, sit down and enjoy. And then notice as you learn and grow, becoming a competent eater is a process and it takes time. So anyways, that's just something that's in there to talk about how to become a competent eater. One of the things that she talks about when we are feeding our young children, and why this is such an important thing to understand, is that we have to know our own eating competence in order to have a better understanding of why we are creating the meals and the structures the way that we are, why we maybe have a focus on vegetables over something else. And if we can go back and think, oh wow, like when I was a kid growing up, this and this was happening, and this is how my parents fed me. And so having an understanding of our own eating competence, it's powerful, and if we can be reflective that way, because then it can also help us better be aware of maybe some things that we're teaching our children when it comes to eating. The feeding dynamics model, it's basically, the concept is that parents, they're in charge of what, when, and where, and the child is in charge of how much they're going to eat. And so within that, we have jobs, like Dana was talking about a little bit. Our job is we need to choose and prepare the food. We need to have regular meals and snacks, make eating time pleasant, provide mastery expectations. So what those are is showing kids how to behave at mealtime. So if in our family we sit on the floor to eat, then we're all sitting on the floor to eat. In our family, we're going to stand in the kitchen. Not that, standing, but some families do, but we are showing kids how they're supposed to behave at the table. Sitting, taking turns, sharing food, respecting a no, all of those things, whatever the house rules are, because everyone has different house rules, but in a nutshell, not fussing. Like if something is icky, no, no thank you. No thank you, I don't want that. And accepting and supporting the children's growth. So accepting that answer of no, right? No, I don't want to try that today. Okay, maybe another day. And then the child's job, their eating jobs is the children will eat. They'll eat the amount that they need. And that was something that was, it was an interesting conversation when we were there, that really trusting kids, and later we'll talk about that trust versus control model, but trusting kids to know what their bodies need. That was it was a powerful conversation. That children will learn to eat the foods their parents eat, but again, that goes back to we have to be sitting there eating it. If we don't like broccoli, and broccoli is on the table, and we're not eating it, we can't expect it to sneak up on our kids. We can't expect them to have a positive comment about it when, we're like, oh, I don't really like that. So if you don't eat it, don't have it there. Or if you want to try to like it and experience what that must feel like for that child to see something that they've never seen before, or they feel like it's kind of an offensive food. That children will grow predictably, and that they'll learn to behave well at mealtime. Those are their jobs. The next is that trust versus control. So Ellyn Satter's, her entire approach is the trust model versus the control model. And so on this little slide or handout that you guys have, it talks about what the trust model looks like in comparison to the control. Do I have this second page? Hold on, wait, I'll just look on here. There it is, yeah.
It's the first page on our handout.
Yeah, no, I had something. Okay, so the trust model is that meal times are going to be enjoyable. You're going to feel good about the food you're eating. It's going to be very relaxed about picking and choosing. You can tolerate, the trust model can tolerate hunger, eating until satisfied. and they take an interest in unfamiliar food. So in the trust model, you're trusting that the kid's going to be happy, they're going to feel good about what's on the table. There's going to be options there, and you can be relaxed about those options. There's not like you need to take more of that, don't take more of that. And that's where that control model is we're like, no, you need to eat more of these vegetables and more of these fruits, or you have to have this protein. Eat, certain portion sizes, like, oh, that's too much of that. Like if you put a plate of cookies on the table and all they want is the plate of cookies, they get to eat the plate of cookies because, again, you put it on the table as a variety. That's a far-fetched example, but it is an example that she uses, and that we are trying to control the weight of the child. Like, oh, you're not gaining enough, so you need more food, or oh, that's too much, so we need to restrict. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, that trust versus control model. I don't think that we gave you guys is it page 19? Thank you. Page 19 in their handouts, which I have, is it right here?
It's the very first one we got.
Yes, sorry, I have them on my computer. But that, I think it does a nice back and forth of Ellyn Satter's model, the division of responsibility, and then the control model. And then interference. So things that mess with the development of that eating competence for young children. So that interference that we talk about, that food restriction, when we start putting restrictions on the kid, the foods that young children eat, they start feeling like, well, why can't I eat that? And either want more of it, but any of that, she calls it static. It just interferes with their ability to develop a relaxed view of food, feel safe about what they're eating, and pressure to like eat this or lick this, taste this, smell it, shake it in the air, say hello to it, all of that, even if it's positive and playful pressure, it can really interfere with the development of that eating competence. My mom keeps telling me to eat this and I don't want to eat it. She's not listening to me. It's making me feel frustrated. I'm not hungry anymore. I'm going to leave the table. My dad keeps trying to put this food in my mouth. It's making me feel really upset, and now I have a big behavior. And so it just kind of ruins that whole meal time. Let's see what else. Lack of support, not creating structure, parents not taking on their responsibilities, and that food insecurity. So, it really goes back to our parent job. Our job is to provide that structure of mealtime. So, consistent meals and snacks at consistent times. So let's say that mealtime maybe, the variety that was there the kiddo didn't particularly like, right? But mealtime is over, but there is a next scheduled mealtime that I can count on because mommy and daddy are my care providers. They always feed me, and they always feed me around these same times. Inconsistent feeding times or grazing or nibbling all day, because we're not sitting to eat and kind of on the go. And we talked a lot about the busy lifestyles that we all lead. Our kids are all involved in things, but it can interfere with the development of a child's eating competence. Let's see, and then parents not taking on their responsibilities. If we're putting food in front of our young children and we're not, we're busy off doing something else, we're not doing our role as sitting and teaching our young children how to behave at the meal, how to enjoy food, how foods can sneak up on you, even as adults. There's going to be foods that we see and we're like, I've never had that before. I'm going to give that a try. Seeing foods really sneak up and like, ooh, that was different. I don't know how I feel about that. I'll have to try it again another time, or however you want to word it. But it's really, it's really our job to help these kids, our young children, learn how to eat. And then food insecurity. I'll be honest, I kind of forgot about what that one was. Is that the limited amount of food that we have in our home? Poverty, yeah. So that one's a tricky one because, when you're living in poverty and you have some food insecurity, you do kind of have to ration or be mindful about what's presented, but it's still possible to have this model. So what Ella would say is that if you're going to make a meal, like let's say you're having burritos, you don't make just one burrito per person, right? You make a big, huge pan of burritos so children can, or an adult, whomever's eating, can have as many as they want and you don't have to get back up. But if you are having to limit the amount of food, so then you'd be restricting, so each kid gets one burrito. And so, but her model can still work. You just kind of have to work around that. She also talks about like really expensive foods. Like if you have a really expensive salsa, just don't put that on the table. You can ration those things, but just being mindful about that. Like, ooh, this is a really special sauce or whatever it is. And And that kind of leads us into talking in more particular about her trust model, the division of responsibility. I don't know, you were really talking about all of that, Lena.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna leave that. And I do feel like we're kind of talking, and please, you can interrupt us, but if we can share it all first. We found this with DeSoto. I mean, a lot of parents, they had a lot of questions and they chimed in and it was perfect. And it is nice sometimes to get through all of this because I do feel like a more rich conversation can happen and a lot of questions. So please, I hope you guys have questions.
So now I'm going to talk about growth. And growth is where the conventional model and the trust model can kind of conflict a little bit. So we have to be careful how we use growth charts because we need to be looking for trends. And I know that we talk about this a lot. So the problem in the Ellyn Satter approach is not a specific number. It's not that somebody's at the first percentile or that somebody's at the 85th percentile. The problem is when those curves dramatically change. So we're looking for trends and we're not looking for just one little blip on the radar. So if they were sick and they lost some weight, you would anticipate that they would gain that back. If they were going through a growth spurt and they gained a bunch of weight, you would anticipate that they would probably get back along their own curve. And the other thing about growth charts is that we need to understand is that they were developed upon a bell curve. So as you would expect, a majority of the people fall like in the middle of it. But we do have to respect that there are people on the ends of those bells, and there's the 1%ers and the 2%ers and the 3%ers, and there's the 80 and the 85 and the 95% kids. And for some people, that's just their normal, and we need to accept that we need to be able to live with that in some fashion. So the definition of weight faltering, she doesn't like to use the term failure to thrive because it's a pretty negative phrase. So she uses weight faltering, which just means that you're falling off of your growth curve. So you're not maintaining an average kind of trend. And then weight acceleration is when you're doing the opposite and you're jumping percentiles in the upward direction. So when you're looking at the conventional approach, which is what I feel like we run into a lot, they base things on either like being too high or too low. So the 85th percentile technically is considered overweight. A BMI of 95% or above is technically considered obese, and failure to thrive is technically considered below the 3rd percentile or the 5th percentile. So in the conventional approach, people will see those numbers and we automatically feel like we have to fix it. So if we're seeing a kid who's at the 85th percentile, we feel like we have to fix it and we have to make that number lower even when maybe they're not genetically supposed to be smaller than the 85th percentile. So we start restricting them and we restrict their portions and we restrict what they're eating and we really control everything in their environment, and then potentially you end up with a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old who no longer has the competence to eat, to be able to eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full. So by restricting a kiddo who's a little bit on the bigger side, sometimes you run the risk of them losing their competence, and then they become bigger and bigger as they get older, and then we end up in that horrible cycle of dieting and losing weight and gaining it back and losing weight and gaining it back. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the other kids that we try to fix, because you're just seeing that they're at the 1st percentile, and so then we have to fortify the formula and we have to calorie pack all their foods, when in reality maybe 1%, they're just in that end of the bell curve and their reality is 1%, and so maybe we don't have to fix it. But she would say that if you do see like faltering and if you see acceleration, those are problems that need to be addressed and you need to figure out why. But it's not always just jumping to, we need to fortify your formula. As we all know, kids have reflux, kids are constipated, kids get sick, so you have to rule out she was really big on making sure that all the medical stuff is ruled out before you start doing this, because if you're beating your head against a wall because a kid has reflux but you're trying to get them to eat, you're going to fail. So we don't just fix kids for the sake of fixing them because of a number. We have to look at either the acceleration or the faltering. And the ultimate goal of this is to restore their homeostasis, which means that they restore their own curve. And in order to do that, you have to make sure that you've ruled out the medical and implement this feeding dynamic. Thank you. I lost the word. to be able to let them move forward over time. That's it.
So that kind of segues into, I'll talk about the division of responsibility, that is kind of her thing. And what would be really helpful is page 57, you guys have in the PDFs, to kind of follow along with this. I'll go through kind of development, infants up until toddler through adolescent. So, and I'll kind of go through the role of the parent and the child in those times. So in infancy, the parent is, well, throughout all of this, the parent is always responsible for what they are feeding the child. So like Megan was saying, they're responsible for preparing the food and providing it on the table. And in infancy, the parent is really trying to organize and calm the child. And so reading their cues, bringing them back to that homeostasis, because we all know that they can't focus on eating if they're trying to focus on postural things, or if they're just uncomfortable. So we want to address the posture, make sure that their face is calm, they're not frustrated, they're not straining their face at all. So really being in tune with the child kind of is the start of that feeding relationship. And then the child is responsible for how much, how often, and everything else. So it kind of, throughout this, and I've been working with a lot of families on this, it gives them a lot of relief. It takes a lot of pressure off of them. I think it takes a little while, but they have so much pressure from the doctors and everyone that they need to eat, because we are more than likely dealing with the kids that are on that first, second, third percentile. So when we talk about that with the parents and say, like, your only job is to provide the food, and then your job's done. They get to decide how much and whether or not they will eat. And I think that really helps the parents. It takes them a while, but I've noticed that at least. And so we all know in infancy it's really dependent on when they want to eat. So if they're starting to cry, that's when parents typically pick up on, okay, let's try and feed them. So really understanding those cues at the very beginning. And then you move into the quote-unquote transitional child, where the parent is still always responsible for what, and they are becoming responsible for when and where. So they're starting to develop that structure for them. You have breakfast, you have snack, lunch, but at this age, the child will still kind of request a snack or something like that. And then, so it's kind of this in-between for them. And at that age, the child is still responsible for how much, whether or not they will eat, and they're starting to kind of create that individuation. So they're going into that toddler age where we all know that they want to do everything themselves. So they're adapting to that change in structure a little bit. And then toddler through adolescent, the parent again is responsible for what, and now they are responsible for when and where. So you have breakfast at this time, take the kids to school, come back, they might have a snack, but it's really up to the parent to decide that. And then again, the child is responsible for how much and whether or not. So like they were saying earlier, really allowing or giving that trust with the child that they know how much they need, and reassuring the parents that they might not eat a lot at this meal, but they will most likely make up for it later on or the next day. And then that kind of goes into, we're all born with internal regulators. So we all have hunger, we all have an appetite, we all reach satiety. And also in that, in meal times, there's excitement. Oh, I really like that food, that's my favorite. I'll just list off the other ones. There's pleasure, connection, initiative, and autonomy. So this kind of gets at the feeding dynamic and the relationship with food, as well as the social aspect of meal times. So children eat best when these needs are recognized and supported. But as Megan was saying earlier, that when there's a lack of support, there becomes this static around all of these needs. So there's mistrust, anxiety, shame, guilt, shoulds, oughts, inferiority, and poor feeding. And so there's the anxiety of the parent kind of bleeding into the child, and then the child has anxiety about food, and so it's just this constant cycle of poor feeding relationship. So it takes time to get back to these things and relearn that eating can be enjoyable and get back to that eating confidence that we talked about earlier. And all of this really comes down to the structure, and because that's all the parent is responsible for, that the bottom line is family meals, that you eat together, and you model how to eat. You talk about things other than food necessarily. You talk about the food, but not eat this, take this bite, and all that, because that creates that anxiety. And so just getting back to the family meals of enjoying them and having that positive experience.
And so in Ellyn Satter, she talked quite about like when you get a referral from a kiddo and let's say you've sifted out through all of the medical information and like they're a candidate for this to work, there's nothing that should be preventing them from eating, whether it be, again, something medical, and she had some other things, but let's just talk about medical for now. And let's say the family's not willing to do family meals. One of the things she would say is she won't take them on as a client. If you are not willing to create family meals and structure, I cannot take you on as a client. And that was really powerful because you're like, well, wait, but she's like, no, if they're not going to put the work into it, families, and so then people had questions about family meals, and she's like, you know, I kind of want to break down what a family meal is, because it's not like let's sit down and mom had a pot roast on and it's like home cooking. A family meal is if you need to go into the Sonic on Tuesday night grab bag or whatever it is, sit down on the table, bless the food, right? Feed yourself faithfully or whatever, and that's what your meal is. But you're sitting there together and you're eating it. So a family meal does not mean healthy. She doesn't use that word at all. Matter of fact, every slide in there, she has healthy food written and an X through healthy, because food is food. It is to feed us. It is to nourish us. It's for us to feed ourselves faithfully, give ourselves permission. And she's like, you know, I mean, in a burger, you've got a grain, you got protein, you got dairy, there's lettuce, maybe not. There's your vegetable.
Potatoes.
I mean, she just said that is at the heart of it, sitting to eat with your family and teaching them how to behave. So that's just just to kind of bounce off of what Madison was saying, the bottom line. But so with that said, though, okay, so when we are making these family meals, like let's just say that that's your jam. You're going to meal plan. You're looking at food groups because it makes you feel good if you need to, but being considerate without catering. So having a meal that has 3 to 5 foods, but that doesn't need to be, it's all mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, French fries, Doritos, and M&Ms, and maybe some jelly beans, because that's all my kids will eat. It's, there's a variety of foods. We've got our core food. She always said a protein in every meal. That was one thing she felt pretty strongly about. And then we've got some foods that they've seen before and they feel comfortable coming to the table with, and then foods that they've never seen before, but we're not going to have an expectation to get them to eat. And one powerful thing she said is, if in your head and in your agenda is, I'm going to get them to eat this, I need to get food in them, that agenda, it's always going to fail. So if you put the asparagus on the table and your only agenda is, I'm going to enjoy that asparagus because mommy likes it, then you're winning. But if your agenda is, I'm going to get everybody at this table to wave to it, kiss it, lick it, send it a, letter in the mail, it's going to fail. I mean, I don't know. It came to my head. So then it goes down to the next one, combining familiar with unfamiliar foods. So this is how we sneak up on things. If it's something that your child has never seen before, we have to have it next to something that they have seen before. It can't be, let's say that the main dish, everyone's having chicken nuggets tonight, but then we have all new sides. So we want it to be something familiar. Something familiar next to the unfamiliar. Offering a food that the children generally eat, or I kind of already talked about that a little bit. Always including a good fat source. She talked about fat quite a bit. butter, give it to them. Like, you know, like if you want the whole tub of butter, have the whole tub of butter. I mean, she didn't say that, but she really was, you know, not restricting them because we need fat. We really do it. And then what happens with that tricky restricting is we you know, create that, well, I didn't get it then, so I'm gonna want more and more and more and more. And she overused the word satiety. You know, and that's why we giggled a little bit when, I can't remember who said it, but she used it so much, but she's right. I mean, if you restrict a child, they're gonna want it more. If you let them have it and they eat themselves sick, they're not gonna eat it again, or they're gonna start to learn to gauge, like, wow, I only want 3 rolls this time because yesterday mom let me have 6, and I'm so full. They really will start to regulate that. Offering enough, don't getting up and down. I don't know about, you know, the kiddos or the families that you guys see, but that is a consistent theme in the families that I see, is the up and down, and these moms that are, bless their hearts, doing the best they can, and they're exhausted, and they're getting up because their kid won't eat, their food gets thrown on the floor, and they're getting up to get more food and more examples, and it creates this like Rolodex of, well, this must be an unlimited supply of food, and I don't want that, I don't want this, I don't want that, and mom's not sitting to eat, she's not able to eat the foods that are gonna, you know, feed herself, nourish her body, and model those behaviors, and then child just sees mom up and down anxious, and so you get into this static and this interference, and I'm not saying it's easy, but, and then letting everyone pick and choose, and she loves the family style approach of like, here, let's pass this bowl around, serve yourself. I mean, obviously infants aren't included in this portion of it because, you know, the only things that we're offering them at a young age is breast milk or formula. And then, so we move on to that mastering meals step by step. You guys have this handout, number 99. This one's a really great one. So, I mean, it starts off with, you don't have meals, don't want them. Keep in mind, she's talking about just anything, just sit to eat. Getting into the habit of it, and then doing a little more planning. And my favorite one, so like, let's say families are like, we have structure, we sit down, we habitually do this, the kids are used to it, I am planning, I'm doing all of these things, that add-on, like just add something. So let's just say your staple is McDonald's, throw something new in there. That's all you gotta do. So if you're already having structured meals, just a little tiny add-on. And then she ends it with not getting caught in the food rules, because I think that in and of itself plays a huge part. Like if I have a family meal and I haven't offered a vegetable, like, man, I'm kind of failing, right? Because I'm supposed to. And we didn't have 3 to 5 today. We only had all grains, you know, it was one of those days. And then that quote is in there, I think it's on your slide. If a family is not interested in family meals, do not take them on for therapy. And then that's just that number 1. We have to be eating with the kids regularly to be able to show them how to eat, which, I mean, it's hard, again. And we did talk with her a little bit about what, you know, we are busy, and, you know, I don't know if she said it this way, but it was more along the lines of, so, like, she just, if you, Ellyn, I love the way that she carried herself, but she was very matter of fact, like, yeah, you're busy, but what's more important? I mean, and so trying to be creative around, if we are going to lead a busy life, how are we going to be teaching our children how to develop a positive eating confidence, or just eating confidence in general. So we talked a little bit about those mastery skills, and just those house rules. So we you know, expect kids to behave, and I know that we see a lot of kiddos that bring behaviors to the table, and I remember Lori saying, like, yes, like you need to behave at the table, and if you're not behaving at the table, then it's not pleasant for anyone. So again, it's our job to show them how to behave, what they're supposed to be learning. You know, obviously at a young age, it's okay to use your hands, right? We were working with that population, but you know what, it's not okay. It's not okay to throw food all over the place. So if we're not sitting there, then we're not able to modulate that, right? A kid throws their plate, like I had a kiddo yesterday, and the mom said, he's kind of reverting back, he was sick, and I feel like I'm up and down again, and every time I go into the kitchen, he throws his plate. And so for me, I was like, okay, so what are you doing in the kitchen? We'll get him some more food. Okay, because he wasn't eating that. And so, you know, families sometimes need to hear this over and over, like, we need to sit with kids, and an easy way to prevent your child from throwing a plate is if you're there. And I don't say it to sound mean or malicious, it's just a fact. If you're there and they're about to throw their plate, you're there to prevent it. But if you're up and down because they're not eating the food that you presented, that you worked so hard on, and you made a good job, a conscious effort of being considerate without catering, and they're not behaving well, then the meal is over. and we need to move along. So that is in a nutshell. Ellyn Satter's Division of Responsibility. We wanted to take, I don't know how much time we left. What did we go till?
4 days and 45 minutes.
4 days and 45 minutes. But we wanted to leave time to, I think that these are on the bottom of their slide, right?
Questions?
Like what, are they?
Yep.
Okay. We wanted to leave some time to talk about like what a feeding goal could look like, what coaching could look like, and just kind of go through there. So I don't know if, you know, you guys want to first, like, maybe let's start with any questions you have, or let's get it.
Well, I saw here that mealtime, she's just against working on any language, anything at any mealtime.
Oh, we forgot to talk about that.
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
right at
that's
the
my
end.
bad.
Oh, okay.
I will, in my defense, I only have 2 of the pages, so I was like,
Sorry.
no, it's, no, don't be sorry.
I was kind of wondering, does that include snacks too? Because I get more mores and dones and helps out of snack time than
Right.
like almost any other time for some kids. So is she opposed to all things,
I
language at
think
all
she's,
meal types?
she's opposed to, let's just say this, if you're putting pressure on a kid to eat, and that language adds additional pressure, and it makes it not a relaxed environment,
Right,
then
sure.
it's not the time to work on that language.
Yeah.
But if that kid wants some more rolls, and you're like, oh, you want some more? Here's some more, but you're not like, say it, do it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
pressure,
Right,
pressure,
right.
pressure. But if it's just this natural, like, okay, here's the rolls, more, here's the, I feel like she was more saying.
Model it, don't expect it.
Yes.
Like, don't make them say more in return for food.
Because in meals, we're trying to teach our kids the skill of eating and behaving.
Right.
If we're adding another skill that we're trying to teach them.
So snack time is included in that, even though they've mastered the whole getting a fruit
Yeah.
snack and eating it and all that good stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's putting pressure. Go ahead.
Well, and I think if it's a child that you're not really working on that feeding a relationship with, if they've got that eating competence, you can move on to that, to more of that language piece.
Oh, right, so that, she's saying these are the ones that are having difficulties eating, that's when you don't wanna do the language too.
I felt like she knew.
She was I think we're trying to like find, she was
Any way
pretty
to do it.
adamant about trying to avoid any pressure. So
Right.
I would venture to guess if you asked this question to her and you said, okay, how about during snack when we're just sitting there relaxing and chatting? And she's like, if the kid is able to feed themselves, behave at the table, and you're leisurely having a snack with them and you're modeling the language, sure. But the minute you start putting demands on them during this and it creates anxiety or any interference, then why are you doing it then?
Right,
Do you know
right.
what I mean?
Sure.
There are so many other routines of the day.
Right,
like
right.
a social interaction where
Yeah.
you could be more tickles.
They were
more
bubbled, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was just really trying to, I think, preserve the integrity of teaching kids to develop an appropriate eating competence.
And I think that that's interesting because even when I went through the ESDM training, they viewed snack time and mealtime as a social opportunity to engage and model, but not necessarily a language request
Right.
time.
Yeah.
So they just wanted you to enjoy that routine with
Yeah.
a child and not wait out different pieces
Yeah.
of it.
Well, I think you could make a case for teaching all communication is a sort of parallel thing to what you're talking about with this dynamic. That, I mean, it can be taught in a way that's not a request and a required response or that control of you have to say more or something like that to get it. But it can be just modeled and taught in a more kind of relaxed give and take sort of,
So she's not opposed to that, just the
No.
modeling and waiting
No,
to
because she
see if
wants you
there's a
to talk.
response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she wants you to talk at mealtime. It's not a solitary environment. It was just the
Take a bite,
requirement
take a
and
bite.
expectation.
Yeah, the
of-
anxiety.
Take a
yeah,
bite
right,
15
okay.
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, take a
How
bite,
do
take
you
a bite.
like it?
I have one of
Lick
those.
it.
Yeah.
Well, you can't expect a child to do something that they're learning.
Yes.
So if you're going to teach, you're teaching, you're not expecting.
Yeah.
They've not mastered something yet, we're not expecting it, we're teaching it. So when they get expectations on them of something they're still learning, it's just gonna make them pull back.
So I have a question about the family meal, because of course you go home and everybody's starving at 5:30 from daycare, and how do you make that work? And it's family meal, so you serve family style, but the parents are gonna eat later. So can they have 2 bites of chicken nugget on their plate and a french fry and it's family meal and they can still eat their meal later?
So a pure, like if you're gonna do it
No.
pure, I'm
You're
stressed about it.
She would, I she'd say, why are you eating later?
Yeah.
Because you wanna have your mealtime be
Yeah.
enjoyable. I mean, that's
I
beyond,
agree.
that's
Well,
why.
so what parents would then say is that it's not enjoyable when I eat with, we want to eat, that's our time later as a.
Because the learning part of it, because then if you do it and you commit to it, over time, it's going to be enjoyable. If a family is in
opposed to.
chaos and they're starting it, the whole thing is gonna suck.
Yeah.
So then it takes time for everybody
I
to
know I asked the
learn.
question.
And when the kids learn that the expectation is gone, and the kids learn that mealtime is not going to be a negative experience, then it becomes more enjoyable for everybody. So you gotta get over the hump of it being not fun before you get to the valley of, okay, we're good now. Yes.
Question, does she recommend every meal that you have in the same presence as your child go that way?
In a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
If you're a purist.
So like if you're a stay-at-home mom, that means breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a mom who works and your kiddos are at daycare, that might mean breakfast if
Yeah.
you're doing it at
Yes.
home
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
And it may not mean breakfast, it may mean just dinner.
Yeah.
right,
So
right.
I guess my question would be, does she ever say working on one meal at a time, or is she just like, this is just gonna be all day long? For those families that are like, dinner time stinks, but we'll eat breakfast together.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
like, look, I feel like she, start where you're at.
Yeah,
Start where you're at
That was
and build up, just
Okay.
build up.
Yeah.
And slowly.
I tend to tell families that, like, because they're stressed out trying to do that. And if they do it, like on the weekend, like pick, a Saturday, but
Yeah.
Sunday
Starting
start
point.
on the weekend when it's like more comfortable and relaxed. Or one meal a day, to start out as a family.
Sends mixed signals.
It does.
It does a little bit.
But if they're on the go because of their lifestyle, which a lot of families have sports and things
Right.
like that, this is the world we live in,
I
unfortunately.
know, it is
And
hard.
it takes time, I mean, she mentioned
says
that.
it takes
It's-
We
it's a
asked
while.
her specifically, so how long do you think this takes? And she did not have an answer to that question.
She had some videos that she showed us that took like, she gave us a number, I forgot.
At least, it was like at least,
Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
6 weeks.
Which
Yeah.
or something
really
like
isn't that long.
right.
No.
And
She's
granted, it
not in
feels
these
like it
homes
is.
forever, I mean, she's in and out.
Like 8-week sessions or something like that was what she committed to, what they would commit to.
What did you want, Kelly?
I just have a question about those kiddos that you give them the plate of cookies and they eat the plate of cookies and they feel sick. So do you point out to them, well, maybe it's because you ate all the cookies, or do you just trust that they're learning that their stomach hurts because they ate all the cookies? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. For sure.
I don't think she said specifically,
She
but
didn't.
I feel like, hold on, let me channel. I feel like she would say, no. I feel like she would just say, huh, you got sick.
I wonder why.
Because
Bummer.
shaming, because then telling them that you did this thing
Right.
that made you sick is shaming.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could email her. We could email if you'd want us to ask.
Yeah.
She's really good about
Well, that
well,
makes
her
sense,
assistant.
though.
But I feel like she'd say, no, don't point it out.
Yeah.
They probably
They
know.
figure it out.
Yeah.
They
Well,
probably
and
know.
that's a learning opportunity for mom, that next time she puts a plate, maybe she'll only put half that amount.
And Ellen would
that's
say,
it.
no,
Ellen would
put
say,
the
no, put the
whole
whole
thing
plate
out
out.
next time.
Yeah.
Because there's your learning
You
opportunity.
said they get to choose how much they have of one thing, but
Yeah.
if we run out of it, then it's all
But they would
gone.
Yes.
still go, like, even if there was more, like the point is that you want them to kind of, right?
Just
Alert,
figure it
satiate
out.
on it.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
like, remember the little kiddo that we tried this with, and he was gonna have a hamburger bun?
Yes.
And so we brought the bag
Yeah.
to the table, a
Uh-huh.
bowl of hamburger buns, I think
Uh-huh.
he ate two while we
Yeah.
were there. And mom's like, does he just get to eat the whole bag? Yeah, he'll eat the whole bag. But then if that bag is gone,
You don't go
Then
get
you
another
don't-
bag.
yes.
you don't get, that's what my question
Yeah,
is.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like, well, there's more bags
No.
with Costco. So let's just get the big toilet paper. Okay. So we don't get out of our seats to
No,
go
you don't
find
get out to,
more.
no.
Okay.
But then you
Whatever's on the
also
table.
don't, so then that's tricky, because you also don't use that as an excuse to put less on the table. See what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like, oh, it's, like, we're only gonna put 3 cookies out, they're gone.
Yes.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But since we are talking about cookies just a little bit, snack times,
Yeah.
you can have an endless supply of cookies. Dinner, it's one dessert. It's not a whole plate of cookies. I mean, it's
And
one
it's often serving it
dessert.
with the dinner.
With the dinner
Yes, with
time.
the dinner.
So you put whatever the dessert is, if you're a dessert eating family, you put the one cookie at the table at the beginning of the meal and you let them decide when they're gonna eat it, and they don't get seconds at mealtime.
It's just one.
It's just one.
And why is that? Like,
Because-
snacks you can have as much.
Because snack time is not entirely meant as a nutrition powerhouse. And dinner, you want them to be able to eat their dinner and to not let the cookie take the place of the other things that are at the table. But she wants you to put it at the beginning of the meal so it isn't this powerful thing that you're like, oh, if you eat all your broccoli, you can have a cupcake after dinner kind of thing. It's just there. And then they choose whether or not they want to eat their one thing. And you let them know there's one. That's your serving.
And that's for families that like consistently do.
Anybody.
Yeah, if you're like a sweet person or a snacker, you like your desserts and your chips, she just says use your snacks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Snack all you want with them during that time, and then obviously be careful at dinner, in a sense, because you don't want it to compete with the foods that are there.
Libby.
Yeah, okay, so I know it says that the child's job is that they'll eat the amount that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, so I feel like I've worked with several kiddos who have come from neglectful pasts,
Mm-hmm.
where maybe they didn't know when or what their next
Right.
meal would be. And so when they are adopted or put in foster care or whatever, and they do get regular meals, it's almost as if they aren't able to self-regulate and realize when they're full, so they'll sit there and stare at their plate and eat and eat and eat and will keep going until you kind of cut them off.
So she would say let them eat, because they have to learn over time that now they're in a place where dinner is going to come, lunch is going to come, but it's gonna take them a minute to figure that out. It might take them a lot of minutes to figure that out because that's trauma. So if we restrict them, if you put a plate of food out for a kiddo who's lived through that, and they haven't learned yet that if mom takes my plate away in 3 hours, mom's gonna put another plate in front of me, it's gonna take them longer to recover from that. So you let them eat, and then and then when they're done, you're just like, and you tell them, we're gonna have dinner, we're gonna have our next meal in a few hours. And you can continually encourage them and let them know that you're safe here, food is gonna come, you're gonna have as much as you need, it's just gonna take them time.
Remember, buddy, we always have snacks, we always have meals,
And there's not in the packet for today, but there's another article in the Ellyn Satter folder that talks about, it kind of relates it to Maslow's hierarchy of
Oh, yeah.
needs, in this model in a way, and it kind of talks to that point of, there's these kids that are so used to not having food all the time, so that trust is not there, and so how to build that up to.
That was the other PDF that was in the email. It was an article, yeah.
And then, so did she have any advice about like the pressure that you get from those pediatricians on your 1% or 3%? Because I think that there's like, so much pressure about like you have to eat this much or they need to gain this much, or
Right.
like, if they
Right.
don't gain this much weight by this date, then
Right.
you're gonna have to go every other week to Children's Mercy for them to do their magic there.
So they talked a lot about making sure that you're communicating with the medical community. So to really have conversations with them and find out what is your concern. And maybe those kids are faltering a little bit, but maybe helping the medical community understand that, they are following a trend, they are following a curve, and they're consistent for who they are. And we see huge differences between pediatrician to pediatrician, and one is like, oh, fine, we're weaning a kid from a tube feeding right now, and the doctor's like, I feel like he was at the 3rd percentile and we were pumping him full, like maybe he's more of a 1% kid. So that's the ideal scenario that you can fall into, but it's really about communicating and educating.
I feel like we've had good luck with
Yeah.
talking with, and I don't know if you have yet, but the families that we've chatted with the pediatrician, they might give me a timeline, like I need you to check back with me in 2 weeks, and then we'll go from there. But she's, Dr. Ham and Dr. Andrews, I feel like they've been too solid on boards,
Yeah.
at least for the ones that I've communicated with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
Me and her at Mass.
I've tried to talk with parents about advocate in the doctor's office, like, knowing this information that we've shared with them, like, just have a conversation with your doctor, like, well, I know there's research out there that suggests that they can regulate themselves, and, you know, this might just be her normal or his normal. So just having the parents advocate for their child as well in the doctor's office.
And is there an article that would be a good reference for parents to give doctors some research?
I think she had some.
And my other question is, what about older kids? Like, when we for my own kids,
Yeah.
like, we don't keep a lot of stuff in our house, just because we don't keep chips and crackers and
And that's
stuff
okay.
like that. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm
she's not
supposed to
saying
go out
that
and
you.
buy them?
No, yeah, don't.
No.
Here you guys.
Feed them what you have, feed them
Right.
what you have.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And that kind of goes back to, I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but I had intended to initially where, you know, there's all these kid-friendly foods where we didn't talk about that. So, you know, the food industry has a really powerful way of having all these food commercials on during the time and during the shows that kids are watching. And so we see all these beautifully boxed, marketed things that we feel like we have to go buy the kids, but we
There's a
don't.
kids menu in every
Or there's a
restaurant.
kids menu in every restaurant, yeah, instead of just the
Smaller
menu. And so no, whatever you're feeding your kids is fine.
Okay.
You don't have to go buy different things. Because the goal is that you're making one meal and everybody's eating the same thing. And what happens in our house is different than what happens in your house, it's different than what happens in your house, and they're all fine.
Yeah, but if they want to eat the whole thing of ice cream, like at 2 o'clock.
At a snack time,
At a snack time.
Right, at a snack time.
Yeah.
Just have at it.
Yeah.
Just shout in.
yeah. And so over time, they learn. I know, isn't it bonkers?
You can do this though, you can put the gallon of ice cream in the middle of the table and everyone has their bowl and they're self-serving, right? 'Cause,
Yeah.
you know, she's really powerful on that, and if everyone is
And she-
partaking in it.
And they should be always sitting at a table to eat. correct?
Yeah, well,
Giving culture, I mean,
I mean,
Yeah.
right.
cultural respect, I mean, you know,
If they always sit at the couch to eat, then that's where they eat, but I mean,
Yes.
generally, she wants you to make it a thing, right?
and if the
A
couch
seated
is where
activity.
you start, that's where you start.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And if you sit on the floor to eat, that's okay. And then, you know, the hope is that eventually, maybe they would get to a table, but as long as they're together, I mean, that was really her big thing, be together. And model it.
because some families don't have maybe a table or
Right.
are eating in a living
Yeah, they eat on the floor.
Yeah.
not on the
Pass
table.
the ice cream on the couch.
Because you're building that trust
Right.
relationship as well. But, so what happens when they eat ice cream and don't want dinner?
So,
Over and over and over repeatedly? That you have those kids who don't go, or that doesn't make me feel good.
So like you gave them their one dessert, which was a scoop of ice cream next to their meal, and all they ate was a scoop of ice cream.
No, they had
Or at snack
10
time,
bowls at
they
snack
pick out
at
on
2.
whatever else.
And then at
And
5
then
won't
they
eat their
don't eat
And
dinner.
don't forget, you're choosing when. Or you're in control of when.
And
So you're not gonna have snack like an hour before dinner.
Right.
And I think that we are kind of teasing a little bit about the ice cream. Remember, your job is to provide the variety. So if you're choosing to put ice cream out as your snack,
Every
just
day.
know that's your eating competence, and that's the eating competence that you're developing for your child. But if you're putting out, you know, a variety, like 2 things, and all they did want was the ice cream, then, you know, hopefully in 2.5 hours, or the space that you provided, the appetite would. And if it didn't, then you know, the next scheduled meal is breakfast. Unless you do a
Yeah,
bedtime snack,
yeah.
you know, that is a part of your routine thing, not we're doing a bedtime snack tonight,
'Cause
so
you
I
were
need to get
full.
more food into you before you go to bed, so you don't wake up in the middle of the night.
That was the key word, get. If you're trying to get them to eat something, they're doing it wrong.
yeah, basically,
Does that-
yeah.
So like if you normally snack on ice cream in the house, I mean, you know, have it for snack time. I don't know if the kid would eat a gallon of night, but she just would, I mean, maybe ice cream is something that's a dessert then, you know? You just offer it for dessert every night and it's just a scoop.
And she wasn't suggesting that you do it all the time or frequently. So like in that situation, if that family is offering ice cream every single day as snack, then kid has the right to choose the ice cream every single day as snack.
How much
So-
is always up to them.
Yeah, and so then the parent, like what she was saying, the parent competence comes in when the parent can choose that, today we're gonna have strawberries and, I don't know, cheese for snack. Tomorrow might be ice cream, but the day after that might be peanut butter and toast or something like that. So it does come from the parent, so the parents have to be competent enough to be able to choose things for their family.
What, and then someone in the room asked about, okay, well, what about, like, they kept going back to healthy and healthy, and she says, if you're hung up on the word healthy, try to get maybe hung up on food groups. So if you feel like you needed to look in a day that I've hit some food groups, she was like, you can do that, fine. She was like, because people were really having a hard time
Yeah,
with.
and I mean, obviously, there's a time and a place for nutrition, like, there's a time and a place for variety, and we know that one diet can lead to a different outcome than another diet. But to focus on it so heavily all the time isn't necessarily going to help an individual in the long run be able to make different decisions.
Probably especially before that reasoning is
Yeah.
there anyway, to where
Yeah.
like having those choices different for an adolescent would be
Right.
much different than the
Right.
toddler.
And she said a lot about, you know, like the goal isn't just about what the toddler is eating in toddlerhood, it's about that toddler growing into a teenager and a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old and then a parent at some point maybe, to be able to circle back to being able to feed their kids.
So how do you encourage the 1% parent that needs to make sure they get enough food in? I guess the child should be in charge of that, but to not give the snack because they're gonna learn that if I don't eat my dinner, I get a snack. I feel like I get that question a lot.
Okay, so the bedtime snack needs to be spaced out far enough that it's not
Okay.
associated with dinner time. So, and it needs to be completely different.
Okay, that's what I
Like,
said.
don't offer the same thing they refused at dinner 2 hours later because I didn't want it 2 hours ago, I probably don't want it now. So it's a clean slate, you start over, you start with a fresh snack, and then you move on. And you don't really acknowledge it as being at all connected to dinner time.
So what about the parent that's gonna give the 8-ounce bottle? And just because they didn't eat dinner, so here you better have some more milk. You would encourage a snack instead?
Is the kid capable?
Yeah.
I feel like with those families, I feel like that's when I say, well, what is your agenda? And
Yeah.
if the parent says, my agenda is to get them to eat more because, then I'm like, there's that word again, get. So then how can that look different? Because then that's more about the parent. It's not about the parent is the one who's feeling anxious. And this is where Ellyn does say she's not just a licensed or registered dietitian, she's also a family therapist.
Oh yeah, she's a social worker.
So she also talks a lot about when you have families that their eating competence is that there's something going on. You can't, I mean, we're only able to help the child, right? Like we really probably need to this is another tier above, like we need to probably help this family along. And we can only coach so much, right? Before then it becomes like now we're their therapist. And she said to be very careful about that line. So if this mom is really struggling and you feel like she's not able to create the structure because maybe her own eating competence, something was going on there, maybe there's some mental health things going on, if she's feeling some pressure, she's probably gonna need to get some help beyond if you feel like you're going week after week and she just doesn't hear that message. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that she
Have
really,
that conversation.
Huh?
I mean, that's a pretty rough
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
It is, and we all struggled with it in the room. Like, I don't think we came to a consensus on how you would go about doing that. But it was a big conversation, for sure.
But it's kind of like they have to be willing to and be ready to change.
Right.
So, so then I feel like then there's the other parent who says, I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night because they're going to wake up hungry.
So then, the bedtime snack,
Okay.
and then that goes back into, like the sleeping routine of trying to help them. I'm about to say to get them to sleep. I almost said it.
I think you get it.
Helping them get through the night, and then the next meal time's the breakfast.
Okay.
Part of that is behavior, and then they learn that, oh, I gotta eat my dinner, and
Yeah.
I gotta eat my bedtime snack, or else I'm gonna be hungry. Because then if you get up in the middle of the night and you give them something, the toddler won.
Okay.
It's hard. I mean, especially when the kiddos are older. She does say talk to them about it. We're going to start sitting to eat, guys. It's going to feel different. But this is our new rule in the house versus an infant. Obviously, you're not because you're supposed to be feeding them when they want, wherever they want. And your only job is to offer the breast milk or formula and create homeostasis. But she, yeah, I mean, not like it's going to sneak up on you. But for the families when their children are waking up in the middle of the night and they're like, well, I just want them to sleep through the night. I mean, there was a point in time that the kid did sleep through the night. I mean, sometimes I almost want to be like, we're still parents to young children who are going to go through stages and they're going to wake up in the middle of the night. It's going to be super annoying and frustrating. And then we're going to have to probably reteach them because the routine changed. And so when you're ready to change that routine of my baby might wake up in the middle of the night, then you're ready for this approach. Until then, keep doing what you're doing. Is it working? No?
Yeah.
Then let me know when you're ready, which I
That's-
think you're really good at, you know? You're really good at saying that. Let me know when you're ready,
Mhm.
right?
I don't know if you guys addressed this when I went out of the room, but what about those babies where the doctors say to wake them to feed them? Did you guys talk about this when I left?
No, we didn't.
Well, it's like our kiddo. We hadn't talked to the doctor.
Yeah.
And just
Dr.
based,
Ian.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
We had a conversation with the pediatrician and shared information, and this particular pediatrician was on board. She's like, I trust you,
And I think the nurse because you talked to the nurse and you had said that, you know, we're kind of treating them like they're breastfed kids. And
Yeah.
that was like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I
and
don't usually get those kiddos, but I was
Right,
just wondering.
right. And then
It's a good question.
as
You know,
long
Because
as
you might
they're-
get it from
yeah.
the baby that's not qualified anyway,
Yeah.
but the.
Yeah.
Right,
uh-huh.
and as long as they're following a curve, again, if they're faltering, that's a different conversation. So if the growth curve is falling off, then that's different than a kid that's hanging out at the first or second percentile all the time. So those are two different things. If it's a weight faltering situation, then that's a different conversation because you don't want a kid to fall. I mean, that's not normal, even in this situation.
and that's where you ask more questions.
Yeah.
So it's not like you go straight to let's wake this baby up and get food into them. It's why isn't this baby wanting to wake up and eat? Why isn't this baby showing me hunger cues? What else is going on? Oh, it's because of, or maybe, you know, maybe we don't know the reason, but
Mhm.
just to ask more questions.
Yeah.
I mean, she really, I mean, we are presenting
Such a
just the,
snippet.
just the, I guess, like the meat of her division of responsibility stuff. She has a whole assessment and evaluation piece where she really goes through and looks at medical, the family's back history, you know, like mom and dad, what was your feeding dynamics like? Well, what was that like when you grew up? I mean, she really is comprehensive. So I hate to slight her there, saying like she doesn't account for, you know, kiddos that really have something going on, or if the families have something going on. But it's just easier to kind of present this and then kind of work your way backward if you have a family that maybe is at a level, like at the tier, you know, 3 approach versus.
That's when we'll just bring you in.
Yeah.
That's when you call Dan.
But,
Just
So
saying.
is she not a big proponent then of the SOS program?
That came up. That did.
We had somebody there that went through that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Tried to-
You know, it's funny. I won't answer on that right now because, well, no, because she isn't. But it's funny, if you sit on all the different pediatric feeding boards, alliances, everything, there is no consensus anywhere.
No.
Some people are
Right.
chewing on things that vibrate. Next thing you know, someone's like, food doesn't vibrate, why are you doing that? And then it's like, no, chew on this, well, why are you teaching them to chew when swallowing's the issue? Buy these, you know, bells and whistles on Amazon, and it's gonna teach them how to magically chew and swallow. And I'm not teasing and making fun of all these things, but we're not all in agreement on what's going on. And so I feel like what I took away from her message was, she's been doing this forever, she's been researching it forever, and she really believes in the power of family meals and teaching our young children how to eat, that her approach can't not be fantastic. Do you know what I mean? There's with the SOS, it's very methodic, it's very,
It's
Right.
therapy. It's
Yeah.
not
And this is not
family
therapy.
meal.
Right.
yeah.
And so another thing that she had said at some point, and she said it directly to me because I had asked the question, and we were talking about but what if, like, we were also hung up on but what if they lose weight, what if they don't gain weight, what if? And she looked at me and she said, if you can't trust a kid to eat, they need a feeding tube. Oh.
Wow.
Like, yeah, you're right. Like, if you legitimately can't trust a kid to be able to do what they need to do to grow and gain weight, that kid needs a feeding tube. And so, a lot of the kids that we see are not anywhere near needing a feeding tube, and we just have to it starts with us trusting, and that the parent can trust the kid and give them time to be able to develop the competence to be able to do it. Because, I mean, mostly kids don't need feeding tubes.
Or maybe they are capable, but we have this arbitrary number that's
Right.
that middle of the bell curve
Right.
that kid needs to be at, when he was gonna be that 20% deviation below, and it was always gonna be him. And so now
Right.
we've created this, you know, poor eating competence for this young kid who now is like, I don't want to eat. I was fine
Right.
until you.
Totally
calorie packed
interfered.
me and fortified my formula, so then I took less and less and less because my body knows I need less because you're giving me more calories per ounce. So I'm gonna eat less now. Ha ha. Ha.
The other conversation that came up was the sensory.
Yeah,
There
that was
a lot
heated.
You know, it's
But
we-
it
I
goes
think
back
some people
to-
are very, proud of the things they do. I wouldn't, but.
But it goes back to if you said it from the beginning, like I was saying, that behavior of, oh, I don't really like how that feels, I'm not gonna, no, thank you. Then that's fine, because that takes into, that's your preference, and that's okay. And you'll learn yourself, and getting that trust with the child, that they'll learn themselves. Okay, they won't eat that for the rest of their lives, or they'll start to try, because they're exposed to it, they'll start to try and explore it. But there was a whole conversation about ham sandwich.
Yes. Oh my God. And I was gonna point something out about calories earlier, that we had to do a couple of webinars before we went, and there was discussion about average caloric intake. So we all have our math, and we do our math, and math says that a 9-kilogram kid needs somewhere around 900 calories, and a 12-kilogram kid needs somewhere around 1,200 calories, and that's the math. But in reality, there's the math, and then there's 20% above and 20% below. So there's a huge range of what can be normal for any given kid, and it's pretty astounding. I mean, the graph that she was showing was like, some kids only need 400 calories a day to gain weight. Like, oh, okay. So when parents are asking me for how many calories does my kid need in a day, I'm having to change the phrasing to say, well, there are calculations that we can do, and this might be a ballpark, but it could also be significantly higher or significantly lower, and really what we need to watch is to make sure that they're trending. And so the number is not as important as the growth curve is. The growth curves are very important, but we can't get hung up on the where. We have to get hung up on the curve and the trend, and not just the point of where they're at. So it's a very important tool, but it's easy to read it in ways that aren't helpful, for sure.
So, I don't know if we can copy this, but so Kay, you asked about like something to share. She has just a page thing in here that talks about the Satter feeding dynamics model. It explains what it is, talks about what can eating competent children do, and then it talks about the agencies that recognize the division of responsibility is in feeding as best practice, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is on there. So, I mean, there's WIC's on there, USDA is on there, Head Start.
The Nutrition Academy is on there.
Nutrition, Expert Committee on Child Obesity. So I don't know if
And there's a
gonna
bunch
be
of,
a whole
slew
slew
of articles.
of attached
Oh,
to
there's
it.
2 pages.
So I don't know if, I mean, it doesn't say it can't be copied, but
I mean, it's got the copyright on it, so it's,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so it's.
Share that with families, let us know, and we can share it. If you can't, I'd like to know if there's a way we can. You know what I mean? I think it'd be a great thing to have for parents even too, to do some buy-in.
I feel like,
I
why
feel
would
like
she want to?
she's usually pretty good about anything in here that isn't to be reprinted, says it on there.
Okay.
But I kind of feel like this could be something that maybe we could put in the share drive, and if a family was feeling like they needed some leverage. But I feel like, I was really nervous about talking with pediatricians after this, like, oh man, they're gonna rely, that's a lot of pressure to put on someone to say, let's give this a try. But it was not near as, I mean, both the pediatricians that I've spoken with, or at least their nurses and kind of had a conversation with, they were a lot more open to trying than I thought initially. I thought I was gonna get shut down, you don't know what you're talking about, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I think that maybe for them, they were like, hey, great, someone's taking the lead. Because I do think that some of our kiddos, that no one's really taking the lead on any of this. They're just kind of getting the runaround, and they're just getting thickener after thickener, and, you know, Nook Brush after Z-Vibe, and there's no solution, you know. I'm not saying those are wrong by any means, but, you know, when you've been in feeding therapy for over 10 years and nothing has changed, then what are we really doing, you know? So that was our biggest take-home message.
Yeah, and this is very off topic, but I just remembered that one of the first things that she does with every family that she works with is videotape. And the power of the videotape is really pretty astounding, because when a parent is doing something, they don't see themselves doing it. And so when you videotaped the meal, and you're watching it, and the purpose is to watch it with the family, and not to point out the negative, but just to observe what is typical for their family, and kind of help them move forward. And I did it with an older kid that I'm working with, and the mom, there's 2 sisters, and no, there's 3 sisters and a brother, and I'm following the brother, and the kids were all sitting, and they pass around the food, and they're doing 1 through 6, but the mom never sits at the table, and she was just constantly getting up and sitting back down and getting up and sitting back down. And I asked her, we talked about it, I said, why aren't you sitting at the table? And she said, because I hate it. Why would I sit at the table? Because he will not, it's miserable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's miserable, and it's not fun, and I can't interact with my family. And so then her only job for the next 2 months was to just sit at the table and try to engage with them at the table. And so, she's doing it, and it's helping a little bit, but it's, the video was just, it's really telling. Yeah, it's really telling. And so I'm trying to remember to ask families to do that a little bit more, but you can learn a lot from getting a bird's eye view of what was happening at the dinner table, for sure. Anything else? Other questions?
Leave you guys with the questions of what kind of feeding goal look like for, in this model, and then we kind of talked a little bit about this, but what will coaching look like for families who have anxiety, fears related to meal times?
And you can look back at your little check sheet and see if, we did that at the beginning of the conference, and then at the end of the last day, just to kind of see, just to kind of see if it had changed, if we had any thoughts on it.
I think we put what will coaching look like for families, and outside of the anxiety or fears related to mealtime, because when Ellyn does this, she's really, I don't even know if she goes into their home necessarily. This is truly videotaping, reviewing, and the child is not present, and this is parents having, you see the progress change because of the videotaping. So obviously this looks a little bit different in our setting than our model, because we're there. But again, what we would probably want to avoid is that we're walking into homes and we become the feeder because meal is so stressful that they can't do it. And I always feel like a sign of that kind of feeding dynamic being broken down between the mom and the child is when you can go in and you're able to feed their child, and they haven't been able to feed their child. I feel like that's a big oh oops, we've got something to look at or work on. Why is that? Why can I feed you as a stranger and mom can't? It's what's going on there and what happened. So I think that I feel like the coaching model, I feel like it really celebrates what she's trying to do, although we're in the home. But I think we probably, when it comes to feeding, could try videotaping more, just to make sure that we're not in there, because it's hard not to be in there, right? And kind of touch the child, and be there and not touch it. You guys know what I mean. We're not babies. We had on here to pull the group, how often do you have family meals? And it wasn't a shameful thing, but just for us to be realist about it. We don't all sit to eat, and so if we're going into homes and we're encouraging these families to do this, and we don't do it ourselves, what is the sweet spot? How can we help families? There really isn't a solution. I think if you're a purist, you're doing it, but I think that Ellyn Satter is also a realist, and she understands that we are going to be on the go. So I think that making use of the time that you have with your family, and if you notice that something is interfering with family meals and you're really struggling, that whatever is interfering, at some point something's got to give, right? So I don't know if we have time to do any more of that kind of discussion, but
since you guys have gone to this and just listening to the team meeting, I've tried some of these things. We tried to have family meals, but I started doing it family style, so just bringing the food to the table. And we've had awful experiences growing up with my daughters who are 14 and 11. And it's so cool because my 11-year-old loves it. And I have dessert with the meal. And she's like, Mom, I need to tell Dad that we need to do it like this. And so now, Eric started doing it at his house, and it's really taken the stress off of us. And I just have to not care.
Yeah.
And that's been hard, giving up some of that control. They eat dessert first all of the time, but who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, they're gonna eat it anyway,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I find them, willing to try some things because they get to put it on their plate. And it's like
Yeah.
a grain of
Yes.
rice.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking a spoonful, but it's like on their plate.
But it's
Whereas I would scoop it and they would never touch
Right.
it, so.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That might be a nice place to sell. I mean, like you relate stories, right? That's sometimes how you get parents to buy in, I feel like. But if if you say, it's the grain of rice, they put it on their plate.
Yeah.
They don't care.
And celebrate
that's the-
every little.
every
milestone.
grain, huh?
Yeah.
Every grain.
Every grain, celebrate every grain. Yeah.
And it's really interesting, so this is, you can stop it for what it's worth, don't listen to me here, but I was seeing a guy who, when we would have dinner, he would plate my food up, and it would make me really angry. Because I'm like, what if I'm hungrier? I can do that myself. Why are you doing that?
Why are you a control freak?
Myself. But again, I was plating my girls' food. So why was
Right.
that fair for me to do that to them? Well, they should have that.
And now you know how they
independence
felt.
to do it.
Yeah.
So it's been like these last, again, since you guys have gone to that, I've been really trying to think about how this affects my own personal life, and it's been very, very interesting. But when I was married to Eric, whenever we had spaghetti, I would pile his plate.
Right.
I was thinking, he can get his own spaghetti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of this has really been nice, honestly, just because it's given me some permission to do things differently, and it's really honestly helped a lot.
And I think that one of the conclusions we came to at some point was that nothing about this is rocket science. Like, this is all very, it's simple in a sense that it's not complicated, but it's not easy. Because you're changing years of habits and years of fear. I mean, for the kids that we see that have been in the NICU, and the conversation is always they have to gain, they have to gain, they have to gain, they have to gain, they have to gain. And then at 2, we're like, they're fine. Just let them sit down and have dinner. And it's a complete mind shift of coming from the model of it's not good enough, it's not good enough, it's not good enough, to just let them be and see what they can do on their own. And you have to undo all of that fear and anxiety and pressure and try to enjoy mealtime again. So.
Because the older they are, the harder it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, I have a kiddo that is obsessed with sugar, and so I started this a while ago, and it was hard for me to get the dessert with the dinner and just let her eat a whole bowl of M&Ms. It still is hard for me. And but there's been progress. It's slow.
It's so slow.
It's slow, but we're trying it.
I will tell you a personal, I tried the bread thing with my daughter. My daughter loves those Hawaiian rolls, okay? And she legit could eat a whole package. And so I, before I went to Ellyn Satter's model, that was the one thing I felt like, shame on me, I feel bad about it. But I did restrict. I was like, 1 or 2, 3, But I came back from this and I'm like, I'm gonna stop doing that. Why am I doing that? She is beautifully made. I need to stop this. That is silly, because then I'm like, okay, my own eating competence. Bread is danger. Stop it, right? And bread is danger. And sure enough, that first day, she ate probably half the package. And I was like you were, like a bowl of it. I was like, and the amount of butter never bothered me. I'll be honest. It bothers my husband, and I'm like, butter that thing up, girl. I don't even care. But she has modulated it every single time. So instead of it being half the package, then it was 4, then it was 3, then one time I was 1.5, and I was like, by golly.
This might work.
This is cool. And my son, he eats dessert always first. My daughter leaves it to the very end, and then she takes forever. She's savoring it.
That's right.
And that's what she says.
Yeah.
50 times. But it's not easy, but that's been helpful to try it at home. I mean, you can see that.
I tried it this week with my granddaughter, who her mother restricts her sweets, and so I said, oh, you want ice cream? Okay, here, gave her a little scoop. She said, can I have chocolate syrup? And then I would normally just go, okay, let me measure out a tablespoon, just to make sure. I said, here's the bottle. She sat there and just ate that whole bowl of chocolate. I think she had half the bottle.
Probably.
Yeah. And then she goes, Grandma, I don't feel so good. So I said, well, what did you learn from that? She goes, next time I'll just squirt a little. And I said,
That's a great question, though.
Yeah,
What did you learn?
what'd you learn from that? And
So who asked that earlier?
that was me.
That was you.
Yeah.
There you go.
That might be a
That's
good
good.
question,
Yeah.
because you're not like shaming it, you're like,
Well,
what's
sure,
yours? She could be like, the sky's blue.
My dad was like, what do you think? Why do you think your stomach hurts, you know?
That's true. I like the why do you think?
Did she talk about going out to eat? Like, did she even like
That's
go
fine.
there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she talks about going out to eat.
What's
didn't
what's
she?
your question?
Like, did she like discuss, like, obviously it's gonna look different at a
Right.
restaurant, so did she talk about that at all? Basically just be together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did, she pretty hard set on like, this is my food, don't touch my food. If you want this, you can get it yourself. Like, she was pretty hard pressed on like not sharing, like, there's a communal bowl in the middle, it's like, this is my food, don't touch
Oh,
it.
taking off each other's plates.
Yeah, she didn't like that.
So,
You know, and
So it
I,
shouldn't have to, because if something's on one person's plate, it's gonna be available for.
And I think that was the point, like, don't eat off
She
of
did
other people's
hers.
plates if it's already in the middle.
Right.
So at a
And then-
restaurant, I feel like someone asked, that's where I was going, I feel like
Yeah.
someone asked that about a restaurant,
So
and
that's
I
what you're
don't
gonna
remember what
say.
she said.
So just like, I guess it's like all restaurants are like
Right.
family style, I
Yeah.
guess, is where, yeah.
so I tell families about that eating off of each other's plate is that it kind of depends upon the audience. Like, Brandon and I always eat off of each other's plate. Like, if we're at a restaurant and he ordered the salmon and I ordered the steak, I'm not gonna order both of those things, but I want a little bit of your salmon.
We learned this
So-
about dating when we were in Madison.
Yes.
We feed it off of all of our plates.
So-
Without permission too.
Right, so
Can I try that poutine?
So it depends upon your audience. Like, I was having dinner with my sister, and I did it to her, and she slapped me. So Bev does not enjoy having people eat off the plate. Brandon doesn't care. So I think it depends upon who you're with and what the situation is.
But the restaurant, I think that someone asked
Basically,
it.
just be together.
Yeah.
Just be
Okay.
together and model.
It just looks different, but.
Yeah, because everyone has
Yeah.
the different meals,
Yeah.
and I think she would say that that is probably the number one place that you wouldn't want to put any type of, you need to eat this, because it's just, you get what you kind of get, right? She did say, you know what though, she did say don't cater, like this would not be the time to like only always order what they always order. I think that she was just like, just order it for them. I mean,
Oh, I don't
I
remember
feel
that.
like I remember that sticking out, and I was like, ooh, that sounds like a nightmare. Because when you're out
Right.
at a restaurant, all you want your child to do is just be
Spit
happy.
Right.
So you're like, you want you want all of the mac and cheese they have in the restaurant? I will get that for you. I
don't
follow
remember.
up.
Yeah.
I feel like I remember her saying like, just order them a meal, and if they eat it, they eat it. If they don't, they don't, and not to go back and we'll follow up.
Yeah.
It's a great
I
question.
don't remember that.
Maybe give them choices if they're not reading it.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe it
Or
was
the
that.
picture one where they can circle the thing.
Yeah.
She was not a big fan of kids menus.
She
I
wasn't.
know.
So maybe that's why we just didn't. Maybe she was just like order them food on the menu.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was not
Like
something.
something that would look like dinner at home, maybe.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. Like it should be no different. Like you shouldn't be all having separate.
I don't remember.
That clearly was not a topic that people
Yeah.
cared about as much.
Yeah.
The ham sandwich was.
What did she say about like, did she say like, come up with, you know, like, you're having a schedule and every day it's gonna be consistent with what your meals are and when they are, you decide when and what with our options. Did she say like to keep it consistent every day, like we always have lunch at 11?
As much as you can.
Timing wise?
Yeah.
And then outside of that time, you don't get to eat.
Right. Correct.
And
That's
like
hard
raising-
with older kids over the summer, I'm gonna have to try that.
It is harder, but they adapt.
Yeah.
So for the kids that are on that are on the spectrum, that have 4 foods that they eat, because there's a lot of them out here, and so,
brown, brown crunchy.
smooth, whatever, and so did she say always provide a preferred food with a non-preferred, or, you know, so that they, because if you sat down to a plate of food that they're gonna freak out over.
There's
I know
no
they have
happy
so many
meal
times
about
They
that.
see it and all that.
Right.
So did she address that at all? as
She did a
far as-
little bit.
Okay,
And
I don't know.
she really wanted variety to be present, I think.
Yeah.
But also the being considerate without, like having something there that they'll.
That they will
And it
eat.
doesn't always have to be the main course. Like, you don't always have to have a family eating chicken nuggets. And I do have that same family with the mom that doesn't sit at the table. The older sister had started really getting sick of seeing the like, she told her mom, I'm really tired of seeing these foods. So they actually made a compromise of mom sometimes she does make 2 things. because the other kids always want to eat the chicken nuggets. So I feel like for those kids, you'd have to modify it a little bit. I don't know.
Ellen really believes that, you know, obviously that has like a medical piece, but it seems like she really believed that if they're only eating 4 foods and that's all they're ever being offered, like, and you can't get any more foods into them, I mean, they're gonna regulate it. So if you present the food and the child doesn't eat it, then you'll present them a snack another time. I mean, like in her purest form, but that they have to see other food. Now, if the kid seeing the food makes them upset, then you have a whole other ball of wax. So like again, like preloading kids' plates with autism, I mean, so then it's like, okay, well then if all they like is mac and cheese and they don't like these other 2 things and they're on the table and all they take is the mac and cheese, then that's all they take. But those other things need to be there and not maybe loaded on the plate because maybe they decided it near me. I mean, even thinking about this when I worked in the district, I mean, I could just see it now, the kids just swiping all the other food away because it was so upsetting, right? So
Or it was even close to their plate or within their
Right.
sight.
yeah.
I think I struggle the most with that scenario and this happening.
So I think about the family, I mean, you serve family style, then even if it's there, but I will, years ago, it was like in the pot still, so it was high, so they not necessarily be able to see it, but it was still served family style. So,
Oh, I see, so they couldn't
do you see what I
visually
mean?
the
They
food,
couldn't
that was
visually see the
upsetting.
food, so it might not be as upsetting.
Oh.
So I suppose then you could tip it down and say, this is what's in it. Do you want, oh, you don't want any? Okay.
Uh-huh,
Back
right,
up.
so that speaks to her family style. I
Yeah.
mean, that's sort of where I've gone with that, but like always offer a brown.
Yeah, I struggle with that.
It's a hard one, but she would just say if you keep doing it and you trust them that they're getting whatever it is, I mean, because when you think about some of these kids with autism that have just 4 foods, they're growing.
Right,
They are.
right.
They're not, I mean, I can think of a kiddo that I have out with you and he's good on his brown diet, you know? So,
Yeah, I feel like lots of them are.
I know we kept you over the time.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you.